"I have not eaten for 3 days," said the Asian mother, knocking at the widowed rancher's door. The year was 1867, and dusk crept over the plains like a veil drawn across a dying fire. Cold wind rolled down from the high ridges, stinging the eyes and carrying the scent of distant snow. Cole Maddox felt it through the gaps in his coat as he stepped onto his porch, meaning only to check the last of the cattle before night settled. Instead, he saw a shadow wavering near the bottom of his steps, a figure barely upright. At first he thought a trick of light, but then the figure lurched and a soft, trembling knock reached his ears. He turned sharply. Instinct made his hand sweep toward the rifle leaning by the wall. Too many years on the frontier had taught him that knocks after sundown were rarely friendly. He eased the barrel up, ready to call out a warning. But before a word could form, the figure sagged against the frame. A woman, small, thin, swaying like a branch ready to snap. Two shapes clung to her, a boy and a smaller bundle that might have been a child or only blankets. She looked up at him with eyes glazed by hunger and cold. "I have not eaten for 3 days," she whispered, and the words broke apart as her knees buckled. Cole caught her before she hit the ground. The boy tried to hold her too, but he was trembling from exhaustion, lips cracked and blue. The bundle shifted, revealing the pale face of a toddler, too silent for comfort. Cole carried the woman inside, heart pounding with more than caution. She weighed almost nothing, her breath shallow, her clothes stiff with frost. He laid her near the hearth and stirred the coals with urgency, tossing and kindling until flame flared bright. The boy followed him in, dragging the toddler, both moving with the slow, uncertain steps of the starved. Cole set his rifle within reach, but he could not ignore the raw desperation etched into their faces. He poured water from a kettle into a tin cup and held it to the woman's lips. She swallowed weakly, then coughed, but some color returned to her cheeks. The boy watched every motion, ready to move if Cole made even the slightest threatening gesture. Cole kept his tone steady, his movements slow. "What happened to you?" he asked. The woman's eyes flickered open. "Camp burned. We ran." Cole's jaw tightened. He had heard rumors over the past week. Travelers robbed near the ridge, a migrant encampment raided by bandits who blamed every misfortune on the railroad workers and the newcomers who followed its shadow. He had dismissed some tales as exaggerations, but the fear in this woman's face was real. "What's your name?" he asked. "My Lynn," she whispered. She pulled the children closer. "This is Dow, and little Hannah." The boy straightened, though he could hardly stand. Cole saw pride in him, thin but unbroken. He nodded toward the child. "How long have you been walking?" "Since the fire," my Lynn answered. Since they killed the men." Her voice cracked, but she forced on, the need to be understood stronger than her grief. "They said we were trespassing, said we were stealing, but we came only to work. My husband, he was promised pay. They shot him when he asked for it." Cole felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. The old ache he thought time had smothered. Loss recognized loss, even across cultures, even across lives shaped by different sorrows. He rose and moved to the small cupboard to fetch bread, hard, old, but edible. The boy's eyes widened as Cole placed it before them. Hannah stirred weakly as my Lynn tore the loaf into tiny pieces, softening each bit with water before pressing it gently to the toddler's lips. Cole watched quietly, struck by the tender precision of her movements. Even after days without food, she fed her children first. The wind outside strengthened, rattling the shutters. Night had arrived fully, the kind that swallowed sound and hope alike. Cole shut the door firmly and checked the latch. "You can stay tonight," he said. "Rest. Warm yourselves." My Lynn's shoulders sagged with relief, but caution remained in her gaze. "We will not trouble you long. Only until morning." Cole nodded, though he had no intention of pushing them out at dawn. Something in her voice, in the children's frail shapes, made leaving them unthinkable, but he did not say this. Trust, out here, grew slowly. He returned to the porch once they were settled, needing a moment alone. The moon had risen, pale and sharp against the dark sky. His eyes drifted to the distant slope beyond the barn, where faint prints dented the snow. He crouched and touched one, fresh, not more than an hour old. Too large to be deer, too many to be a lone traveler. He followed the line of tracks as they curved behind his barn and disappeared into the tree line. A chill deeper than winter settled in him. Someone had been watching the ranch. He stepped back inside, closing the door quietly. My Lynn had fallen asleep. Hannah curled against her, Dow sitting upright but fighting to stay awake. Cole knelt beside him. "Did someone follow you?" he asked softly. Dow hesitated, then nodded. "Men. With guns. They said Mama belonged to them now. She tried to run. They shot at us. Mama hit us. We ran until we couldn't run anymore." Cole felt a surge of anger he hadn't felt in years. Memories of his wife. Her laugh. Her soft lullabies. The scent of lavender she kept in tiny cloth bags flooded him. The night she died. The bandits who broke into their cabin. The fire that drove him into the snow with her limp body in his arms. He had shut that pain behind a wall thick as stone, but this family's suffering cracked it anew. He placed a hand lightly on Dow's shoulder. "You're safe here tonight." Dow's eyes glistened. "Will you leave us when they come?" Cole shook his head. "I don't run from men like that." The boy nodded and finally allowed himself to lie down beside his sister. Cole kept the fire low and warm, but he did not sleep. He sat in the rocker with his rifle across his lap, watching the flicker of flames dance across the room. My Lynn breathed softly, each rise and fall of her chest proof she was still alive. Hannah's tiny fingers curled around a loose thread in her mother's sleeve. Dow murmured in his sleep, whispering half-formed words in a language Cole did not understand. Hours passed. The fire settled into slow embers. Cole's eyelids grew heavy, but he forced them open whenever they fell. He had lost too much already in this life. Tonight, he would not lose more. Just before dawn, a distant crunch reached his ears, a foot pressing into snow. Then another. He stiffened, every sense sharpening. He rose silently and crossed the room, pausing only to glance at the family still sleeping. He eased open the front door and stepped onto the porch. The sky carried a faint blue edge, the world balanced between night and day. Cole scanned the horizon and saw the shapes. 3 men, silhouettes moving with purpose, approaching the barn. One carried a lantern held low to the ground, as if searching for sign. Another rested a rifle on his shoulder. They were looking for tracks. His breath steamed in the cold air. He ducked back inside, closing the door with care. My Lynn stirred instantly, sensing something wrong. "What is it?" she whispered. "Men," he said. 3 of them, looking for someone. Her face blanched. She grabbed her children, holding them close as fear rippled through her body. Cole stepped closer to her, voice low but steady. "Listen to me. They don't know you're here yet, but if they find out, they won't leave willingly." My Lynn swallowed hard. "What will you do?" Cole checked his rifle and loaded another cartridge. "What I have to." He met her eyes. "But we can't stay. Not once they start circling the house. We'll leave before the sun is fully up." She hesitated, torn between disbelief and desperation. "You would help us?" Cole felt the old ghosts rise again, whispering of loss, warning him not to care. But he ignored them. "I'm not letting them take you. Or your children." My Lynn trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of hope she barely dared to hold. She nodded slowly. The first beam of dawn touched the fields beyond the window. Cole glanced toward it, then back at the family huddled in his small cabin. "We move fast," he said, "and we don't look back." Cole gathered supplies with swift, practiced motions, dried meat, a canteen, an extra blanket. My Lynn helped despite shaking hands, lifting Hannah against her shoulder and guiding Dow toward the door. For a moment, Cole watched them, struck by how fragile they appeared, and yet how fiercely they clung to life. That kind will deserve protection. He slung his rifle across his back and stepped outside first, testing the air, scanning the slopes for movement. The 3 men had vanished from view, but that made the morning no safer. Tracks crisscrossed the snow around the barn, signs of a search that had come too close. Cole motioned for My Lynn to follow. They moved quietly across the yard, breath held, feet sinking softly into the frost. Every sound felt sharp against the stillness. A crow cried from a distant pine, startling Hannah, but she only buried her face deeper into her mother's neck. They reached the horses, and Cole helped My Lin mount, placing Dow in front of her. The morning held danger, but also a fragile hope. Cole mounted his own horse and exhaled, knowing the trail ahead would test them all. Indeed today. The cold bit deeper as Cole guided his horse into the thinning dark, the horizon only just beginning to glow with the pale colors of dawn. My Lin held Hannah close against her chest, the toddler wrapped so tightly she was little more than a breathing bundle. Dow clung to the saddle horn in front of her, jaw tight, trying to be braver than any boy should be asked to be. Cole kept his horse a few strides ahead, scanning every ridge, every hollow, every twisted pine for movement. He knew the land better than most men alive, but danger had a way of turning familiar trails into traps. The snow sparkled faintly, masking hollows and prints alike. They moved slowly, breath fogging the air, hooves crunching through thin crusts of ice. Behind them, the ranch sank into the distance, smoke rising and faint, uneven lines from a half-charred barn. Cole felt a pang deep in his chest, a reminder of everything he was walking away from, everything he might not return to. But he pressed on. Safety lay nowhere behind. Only ahead, the trail dipped into a narrow ravine, the tall stone walls offering shelter from the wind. Cole slowed his horse and raised a hand signaling for silence. My Lin obeyed without question, tightening her hold on Hannah as she leaned forward to listen. Even the horses seemed to feel the command, moving more quietly through the powdery drifts. A crow's cry echoed overhead, harsh and sudden, making Dow flinch. Cole held up a finger, signaling them to wait. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking with soft thuds into the snow. He crouched, pressing his hand against the cold earth, then lifted a broken twig lying in the path. Fresh, snapped recently and not by wind. He studied the tracks nearby, hooves for sets, moving fast. Not his, not from the night before, and heading in their direction. He rose, jaw tightening. "We need to move," he said quietly. "Now." My Lin didn't question him. She nudged her horse forward, urging the animal uphill. Cole mounted again, keeping them tightly behind him as he steered away from the ravine and toward the old pine ridge. Wind lashed against them as they climbed, pushing back like a living thing determined to make the ascent harder. Cole's horse snorted and shook its head, but obeyed. My Lin's horse struggled more, weaker and weary, but she whispered steady encouragements in soft, breathless Mandarin. Words Cole didn't understand but felt the meaning of all the same. They crested the ridge as the first fingers of sunlight reached over the mountainside, painting the snow in hues of pink and gold. For a moment, the world looked almost peaceful, but Cole's eyes were drawn to what lay far behind. 3 riders moving fast along the lower trail, following the ravine he had just left. Even at a distance, he could see they were armed and determined. "They're following your tracks," he said, voice low. "We need cover before they get higher ground." My Lin's breath hitched, but she nodded. "Where?" "There's a river ahead," Cole said, "frozen in parts, running fast in others. If we cross it before they reach the bluff, they'll lose our trail." He knew the crossing would be dangerous. The water below the ice moved fast enough to swallow a grown horse in seconds. He had lost a foal there once, years ago, before he learned the safest way across. The memory rose unbidden, as memories often did on cold mornings like this, reminding him of things he couldn't change, couldn't save. He pushed the thought down. They descended from a ridge and moved toward the timberline. Frost-laden branches brushed their faces as they entered the denser forest, the scent of pine filling the air. The woods muffled sound, but not enough to hide the faint, distant clatter of hooves behind them. The men were gaining. Cole gripped the reins tighter. "Stay close," he warned. "The river's ahead." Minutes later, they broke through the trees and reached the bank. The river churned beneath sheets of ice. Its surface fractured in places where the current tore free. Mist rose from the darker patches, curling like breath from some enormous beast waiting hungrily for the unwary. My Lin stared at it with wide eyes. "We must cross that." "If we don't," Cole said, "they'll catch us." She swallowed hard but gave a firm nod, lifting Dow's chin to make sure he looked forward, not down. Hannah whimpered, sensing her mother's fear, but My Lin pressed a kiss to the child's head. Cole moved ahead first, guiding his horse onto the thicker sheet near the bank. The ice groaned but held. He tested each step, feeling for weakness through the horse's shifting weight. His breath came fast, each exhale turning to clouds that drifted upward and vanished. "Come on," he called softly. My Lin urged her horse forward. The animal hesitated, hooves pawing at the ice, nostrils flaring. "Easy," Cole said, keeping his tone low. "Just follow." My Lin murmured soothing words to the horse, and slowly it stepped onto the ice. The crack beneath them was sharp and immediate. Cole's horse halted at once. "Stop," he commanded. My Lin froze. Dow clutched her tightly. Cole dismounted, boots slipping on the frozen surface as he steadied himself. He crept toward the horse, hands raised. "We need to lead them across," he said. "Weight's too uneven when they're mounted." My Lin nodded and, shaking, began to lower herself from the saddle while holding Hannah close. Cole offered an arm, stabilizing her as she worked to keep her balance. Hannah cried out once as a cold air hit her, but My Lin soothed her quickly, pressing the child beneath her cloak. The ice moaned again, louder this time, sending a shiver through Cole's spine. He led both horses forward slowly, feet sliding cautiously. The river rushed beneath, a muffled roar beneath the fragile crust. They reached the midway point when a gunshot cracked through the forest behind them. Cole flinched, boots skidding, but he held firm. The bullet struck the ice yards away, sending shards flying. "They see us." My Lin gasped. "Don't look back," Cole growled, gripping the reins tighter. "Just move." Another shot rang out, then another. The riders had reached the treeline. The ice trembled violently beneath them. Cole pushed forward, teeth clenched, heart pounding as each step brought them closer to the opposite bank. They were almost there when the crack came, a sharp, splitting sound that cut to the air like a scream. Cole spun. The ice beneath My Lin's horse splintered into jagged lines spreading in every direction. "Move!" Cole shouted, reaching back. The horse panicked, rearing, hooves plunging into the widening fissure. Water surged up in icy bursts. My Lin stumbled, nearly falling as she held Hannah above her head. Dow screamed. Cole dropped the reins of his own horse and lunged, grabbing My Lin's arm just as the ice caved beneath her horse. The animal struck the water with a terrible splash, thrashing as the current seized it. My Lin cried out, but held Hannah tight. Cole pulled her and the children forward, boots slipping on the slick surface. "Don't let go," he ordered. She clung to him with desperate strength. Behind them, the horse disappeared under the current, swept away in an instant. Another gunshot echoed. A chunk of ice exploded near Cole's feet. He dragged My Lin the last few yards, muscles straining, breath a ragged cloud. With one final heave, he pulled her onto solid snow, followed by Dow, who tumbled forward with a cry. "Run," Cole said, grabbing his horse's reins and urging it into the trees. My Lin, shaking violently, followed beside him, clutching Hannah in both arms. They sprinted to the forest, branches whipping their faces, snow spraying under their feet. Only after several minutes of desperate running did Cole slow, panting hard, listening. The gunshots had stopped. The river had bought them time, but not safety. When they finally reached a sheltered hollow beneath a stand of towering pines, Cole motioned for them to stop. My Lin collapsed to her knees. Hannah still clutched so tightly the child could scarcely move. Dow sank beside her, chest heaving. Cole's horse trembled, nostrils flaring from exertion. Cole knelt beside My Lin. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "Just cold." Cole reached into his saddlebag, pulling out a blanket. He draped it over her shoulders, careful not to disturb the child. My Lin breathed shakily, trying to regain control. "We need a fire," she whispered. "Even a small one, for the children." Cole knew she was right, but he also knew fire meant smoke, and smoke meant being found. He looked at Dow's pale face, at Hannah's trembling little hands, and made a decision. "A small one," he said, "hidden in the rocks." He gathered fallen branches and pine needles, placing them carefully between two boulders in a hollow to trap the smoke. His hands shook from cold and adrenaline as he struck flint to steel. Sparks caught, growing into a thin thread of flame. He fed it slowly until a modest fire flickered. My Lin moved close, holding Hannah near the warmth. Dao edged forward, rubbing his hands together, teeth chattering. Cole sat opposite them, forcing his breath to slow. He watched My Lin, the way her eyes followed every sound, every shift in the wind. She was exhausted, but alert, driven by a mother's instinct to sense danger before it struck. He admired her strength, the quiet resolve that had carried her through horrors no one should face. For a moment, he saw echoes of his wife in her, different in every way, yet bearing that same fierce spark. "We lost the horse," she said quietly, guilt creeping into her voice. "I'm sorry. That wasn't your fault," Cole replied. "And we're alive because you held on." My Lin met his gaze, gratitude mixed with fear. "Why do they chase us so?" Cole hesitated. "Did you see their faces? Hear anything that—" She shook her head. "Only shouting. They burned the camp, took the women who couldn't escape. The rest they shot." Her voice cracked. "I hid with the children in the woodpile until it was night. Then we ran." Cole clenched his fists. Men who preyed on the weak were a breed he knew too well. They had taken his wife. They had taken My Lin's husband. And now they hunted her. He felt a fire build in his chest, hotter than the flames at their feet. "They won't stop," he said. "Not until they're dealt with." My Lin's breath hitched. "You would fight them alone?" "I've fought worse," Cole muttered. But he knew this wasn't true. Fighting bandits on open ground was one thing. Protecting a mother and two children while doing it was another entirely. Before he could speak further, a low growl drifted from the trees. Cole stilled. His hand drifted to his rifle. The growl came again, deeper, closer. My Lin pulled Hannah tight, eyes wide. Cole rose slowly, scanning the shadows. A large shape emerged from between the trees, moving low, deliberate, a mountain lion, ribs visible beneath its winter coat, eyes gleaming with the hunger of a creature willing to take any risk for meat. Cole raised his rifle. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The cat crept forward, muscles coiling. Cole aimed, exhaled, and fired. The shot echoed like thunder. Snow burst from the ground where the bullet struck. The lion leaped sideways, fast as lightning, disappearing into the brush. Cole turned, searching for it. My Lin held her breath. Dao froze, eyes huge. The forest went silent. Then the lion sprang from Cole's left. He turned too late. The beast crashed into him, knocking him to the snow. Its claws raked across his coat, teeth snapping inches from his throat. Cole grunted, grappling with it, trying to shove a rifle between its jaws. My Lin screamed. Dao scrambled backward. The lion's hot breath hit Cole's face as it lunged again. He jammed the rifle sideways, forcing its jaws wide. Pain seared through his shoulder as the claws dug in. My Lin grabbed a burning branch from the fire. Without hesitation, she rushed forward and swung at the lion's face, embers trailing through the air. The animal recoiled with a furious snarl. Cole seized a moment, yanking the rifle free and firing point blank. The lion collapsed, breath gurgling, then fell still. Cole lay panting in the snow, blood staining his coat. My Lin knelt beside him, dropping the branch, hands trembling. "You're hurt," she whispered. "Let me see." He tried to brush her off, but she pressed her hands firmly to his shoulder, stopping the bleeding with cloth torn from her own sleeve. Her touch was steady despite her fear. Cole watched her work, struck by her resolve. "You saved my life," he murmured. "You saved ours first," she replied softly. Dao helped gather more snow to cool the wound. Hannah whimpered, sensing the fear around her, but My Lin whispered to her until the child quieted. Cole gritted his teeth as she tightened the cloth, but he didn't pull away. There was something grounding in the way she tended him, something that reminded him he was still human, still alive. When she finished, she sat back, exhausted. Cole tried to push himself upright, but My Lin stopped him with a hand on his chest. Rest, she said firmly. Just a moment. You've lost blood. Can't, he said, breath ragged. They'll catch up. Need to move before. Voices drifted through the woods. My limbs stiffened. Dow froze mid-breath. Cole reached for his rifle, forcing himself upright despite the pain. The voices grew clearer, angrier. The bandits were near, very near. Cole steadied himself, eyes hardening. It's time to run, he said, and time to fight if we must. My Lin lifted Hannah. Dow grabbed her skirt. Cole loaded his last cartridge and rose, blood seeping through the cloth. The danger they fled was no longer behind. It was coming straight for them. The night settled over the plains like a heavy quilt, thick with cold and the kind of silence that warns a man trouble isn't far behind it. Elias stood at the doorway of his battered old barn, staring across the open stretch of land where moonlight cut silver lines through fields of brittle grass. Behind him, Maylin and her children slept inside the ranch house, their breathing soft, steady, and, after everything that happened, finally safe for a moment. But safety never lasted long on the frontier, and Elias felt danger creeping like a wolf circling the campfire. He could still hear the sheriff's warning echoing from earlier that day. Those men ain't from around here, and they ain't just passing through. They're hunting someone. Elias had known exactly who they were hunting the moment he looked into Maylin's terrified eyes. Her story had spilled out that morning. How the men chasing her weren't mere bandits, but traitors who trafficked anyone who couldn't defend themselves. She'd escaped them once, but men like that didn't forget humiliation. Elias kept his hand on the rifle sling across his shoulder. He told himself he was only guarding his property. That was a lie he'd repeated all day, but it didn't hold. The truth was simpler, heavier, and carved deeper in his chest. He wasn't going to let anything happen to that woman or those children. Not while he still had breath in his lungs. The wind shifted, carrying a smell Elias recognized too well. Sweat, horses, and that faint sourness of men who traveled long and hunted harder. He stepped away from the barn and crouched low, his boots sinking into the cold dirt. A lantern appeared in the distance, weaving through the sagebrush like a dying star. Then another, then 3 more. They were here. Elias ducked back inside the barn and moved with quiet, practiced hands. He saddled his bay mare, checked the cinch, loaded extra cartridges into his coat, and slipped the long-barreled rifle into its scabbard. Every movement felt heavier than the last. Years ago, when his wife was alive, he might have turned these men away without bloodshed. But grief had changed him. Isolation had sharpened him. And Maylin's trembling voice had carved something awake in him he thought was dead. Purpose. He led the horse out and tethered her near the ranch house, then stepped inside. The fire burned low, casting long shadows across the wooden floorboards. Maylin stirred from her pallet by the hearth, her dark hair tumbling softly as she pushed herself upright. "You heard them," she whispered. "I did," Elias answered. "They're close." Her eyes glistened not with fear, but with resolve. You could not face them alone. Elias gave a tired, knowing smile. You ever known a rancher who listens when told not to be stupid? She rose fully now, desperation edging her voice. "Elias, they won't stop. If they take me, they'll take the children. We must flee before they surround the house." He shook his head. "You run in the dark, you got no chance. Out there is their advantage. In here," he tapped the wooden wall. "Here I know every board, every shadow. They ride in blind. That gives me something." Maylin swallowed hard. "I do not want you to die for us. And I don't intend to die tonight." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But I'll be damned if I let them lay one finger on you or those young uns." The house creaked. A distant shout carried on the wind. The children stirred, whimpering in their sleep. Maylin knelt, brushing their hair gently, then stood again, her face set. "What do you need from me?" Elias glanced around, calculating quickly. "Take the children into the cellar. Keep the lantern low. If things go bad, you stay hidden till morning." "And you," she whispered. "I'll give them a reason to regret coming this far." He stepped outside before she could say another word. The air bit at his skin as he closed the door behind him. The lantern lights were closer now, too close. He moved quickly to the outer fence line where an old wagon had been abandoned years ago. It wasn't much, but it gave him cover. He knelt behind it, raised his rifle, and pressed his cheek against the cold stock. The riders slowed. 6 of them. Rough men, scarred and hungry-looking. Their coats ragged and their mouths curled into cruel smiles. The leader rode a tall chestnut stallion and held himself with the arrogance of someone who never heard the word no. He raised a hand, and the others halted. "Ranch house up ahead," he barked. "Lights inside. We'll check it. She can't be far." Elias didn't give him the chance to say anything else. The first shot cracked like thunder. The leader jerked hard, his hat flying off as the bullet grazed past his temple. His horse reared, nearly throwing him. The others cursed, ducking instinctively. Elias chambered another round. "You boys picked the wrong ranch." The men scrambled into a loose formation, firing wildly toward the sound of the shot. Bullets thudded into the wagon boards. Splinters exploded around Elias's face. He rolled to the side, keeping low, and fired again, catching one of the riders in the shoulder. The man toppled from his horse with a scream. Chaos erupted. Horses whinnying, men shouting, gunfire ringing across the plains. But Elias moved through it like a man forged by the land itself. He ghosted between shadows, firing deliberate shots, using every fence post and feed barrel for cover. The attackers couldn't pin him. He was everywhere and nowhere, a phantom anchored only by the burning determination inside him. Still, 6 men were 6 men. A bullet tore past his thigh, close enough to sting. Another whizzed by his ear. He ducked behind a stack of firewood, panting, reloading quickly. One of the outlaws shouted, "We ain't here for you, rancher." Hand over the woman. Elias felt heat rise in his chest. Not fear. Rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. "You'll have to go through me first," he yelled. "We intend to." 3 men dismounted and advanced on foot, spreading wide in a hunting arc. Elias cursed under his breath. Smart bastards. They weren't amateurs. They were trackers, stalkers of human prey. He fired at the first, missed. Fired again. The man dove behind a trough. Another bullet zipped past Elias's arm, ripping through his sleeve. He hissed, dropping lower. This wasn't sustainable. He needed an edge. Something unpredictable. A creak sounded behind him. Elias spun, rifle raised, only to see Malin emerging from the house, clutching a small kitchen knife, her eyes blazing. "Get back inside," he hissed. She ignored him and thrust a bundle toward him. It was a small pouch of powder. "You said, once your rifle can spark flame if mixed with this. Use it." Elias blinked. She'd been listening. Smart woman. He poured a small measure into his palm, smeared it along a rifle cartridge, and loaded it carefully. "Get back underground. Now." She hesitated, torn between fear and refusal, but finally nodded and vanished inside. Elias steadied his breath. He shifted, waited for movement. There, a shadow creeping right. He fired. The cartridge ignited midair, blooming into a small burst of light. The startled outlaw yelped and stumbled back, blinded. Elias shot again, this time hitting true. The man collapsed, rolling into the dirt. The others paused, unnerved. "Hell is he using?" one shouted. "Which fire?" Their hesitation gave Elias seconds, just enough. He moved positions again, climbing atop the wagon bed. From this angle, he saw the leader mounting a new approach, riding toward the house itself. No. Elias aimed sharply and fired, hitting the leader's saddle horn. The stallion bucked, throwing the man to the ground. He howled in fury, scrambling to his feet. "I'll skin you for that." Gunfire erupted again. Elias ducked, feeling a bullet graze the wagon bed inches from his hand. He dropped behind the wheel, heart pounding. Then he heard something else, a soft scrape of wood. The cellar door. His stomach dropped. One of the outlaws had circled around the back of the house. He sprinted without thinking, boots pounding the dirt. He rounded the corner and saw a man prying at the cellar hatch with a crowbar. Elias fired but missed. The angle was bad. The man whipped around and lunged at him with the crowbar raised high. Elias blocked the blow with his forearm, pain shooting up his elbow, and they grappled in the dark like animals. The outlaw swung wildly. Elias ducked, tackled him, and they crashed hard into the ground. Dust filled the air as they rolled, fists and elbows flying. The outlaw slammed a knee into Elias's ribs, knocking the wind from him. He raised the crowbar again. A sudden crack rang out. The man jerked. He fell sideways, eyes wide, blood spreading through his shirt. Malin stood behind him, gripping Elias's discarded pistol with trembling hands. Elias stared at her. She stared back, breath shaking. "You said keep the children safe," she whispered. "I did." Elias didn't have time to respond. Another shout came, angry, desperate. The leader charged from the shadows, gun raised, firing wildly. Elias shoved Malin aside just as a bullet tore through the ground where she'd stood. Elias rose, fury colder than the moonlight. He met the charging outlaw head-on, grabbing the man's arm, knocking the pistol away. The two struggled, teeth grit, boots grinding dirt. The man was strong, fueled by hatred, but Elias was driven by something deeper: loss, responsibility, and the raw instinct to protect. They crashed against the porch railing. It cracked under their weight. The outlaw pulled a knife, slashing across Elias's side. Elias roared through the pain, seized the man's wrist, and slammed it against the post until the knife dropped. The outlaw lunged again, but Elias caught him by the throat and hurled him back onto the dirt. The man stumbled to his feet, spitting blood. "She's ours," he snarled. "You can't protect her forever." Elias lifted his rifle, hand steady despite the shaking in his bones. "Watch me." He fired. The outlaw fell motionless. Silence swept across the ranch, not peaceful, but heavy, the kind that follows destruction. The remaining riders fled, spurring their horses into the darkness. Their cries faded into the horizon until nothing but the wind remained. Elias staggered back, clutching his bleeding side. Malin rushed to him, catching him before he could fall. "You're hurt." "I'll live," he muttered thickly. "Ain't the first time someone tried to put me in the ground." She steadied him, her hands trembling. "Why did you risk so much?" He looked at her then, really looked. The fear, the strength, the warmth she carried even after all she had endured. Something inside him softened, cracked open. "Because you deserve someone to stand for you," he said quietly. "And I reckon I needed someone to stand for too." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but something gentler. She rested her forehead against his. "You saved us," she whispered. He swallowed hard. "No, you saved me too." They stood like that beneath the moon, two souls battered by the world, yet held together by something stronger than fear, something beginning, something worth fighting for. And as the cold wind swept across the plains, Elias knew one truth with absolute certainty. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning.